Let's get into this story now. The Department of Social Development in the Eastern Cape forfeiting millions of rand meant to assist those worst affected by poverty in that province. And that's because they were unable to spend the money. This happens even though the province is reportedly the most poverty-stricken province in the country. Joining me now to delve into these issues is the Eastern Cape Social Development Spokesperson, Busisiwe Jemsana Mantashe. Ms. Jemsana Mantashe, thank you very much for your time. Let's begin with the amount of money that your department has had to forfeit back into the national coffers because you simply could not spend it. Do you remember how much you told the legislature there last year?
I really wish, Toli, preparing for this interview, I would have been told that we'd be getting into that so that I get the correct figures and we're able to speak to the amounts. But unfortunately, that was not the case. But I can confirm that we've had a shrinking budget owing to COVID-19, but also owing to the fact that last year we were not able to spend the whole budget because the service provider that we had outsourced this to could not deliver to all the districts because we had appointed one service provider. But we've moved as a department this year to say we are going to have 8 service providers for the 8 districts in the Eastern Cape so that we manage the risk of one service provider not being able to deliver as per the agreement with the department, the social relief of distress. Currently, our budget is 8 million for the province, and each district is getting 1 million rand to spend on the social relief of distress grant.
All right. Well, let me happily remind you, Ms. Jemsana Mantashe, that your department returned 67 million rand back to the national coffers because that money simply could not be spent. And this is on the back of reports coming from Butterworth, that tragic story of a mother who killed not only herself, but her children, her 3 children. Now, why would the department send money back to the national coffers when there are people who are in dire poverty in your province?
Again, Toli, I really wish we so that I also respond to you with the specifics and the amounts. But let's speak to the recent case in Butterworth. Immediately when we heard as a department of this tragic incident that has taken place, we want to check if the family was not getting any social grant because the children were eligible for the social child support grant, and all of them were getting the social grant. But also, as I alluded to, in terms of why the money had to go back to the National Treasury is because the service provider that we had appointed failed to deliver on what was agreed upon, which is the social relief of distress to the districts that we had contracted them to, which is why we then came up with a plan to try and make sure that each district has its own service provider for the social relief of distress. But we are moving, Toli, as a department to say relief of distress.
Before you move, Busisiwe, before you move, let me interrupt you, and I apologize for that, because this is a very important matter. Yes, at the risk of being sidetracked in talking about this tragic issue of a family that is gone, you appointed a single service provider, one service provider. What was the wisdom of doing that?
Well, I think the thought behind that was that if you appoint one service provider, then you would then avoid the administrative issues of having to appoint many service providers. I think the department then thought if you contract one person who shows that they can actually deliver on this, or maybe subcontract other people themselves, they would be able to manage, and you will be limiting the risk of having many people who you appoint who might not deliver. But of course, it has been proven that that was not the way to go. In fact, you should have taken the other route of appointing many people for the districts, which is what we have done this year.
Let me quickly come in there.
Of that financial year.
Okay, so this person had a proven track record. Who are they, or what is the name of the company, and how many years have they been in the space?
Again, Kholi, I do not have that detail now because I was not aware that this is what we'll be talking about. Had I known, I would have went back to the records to refresh my memory, to look into the details of who was the person and what is it that they had said they would do and what were the reasons that they were appointed. Also remember, when they were appointed, we came into the department with the new MEC in August. This was at a time when that had passed, and we had to then introduce measures to make sure that it does not happen again for this financial year. But I would have gladly retrieved that information for the benefit of this interview because it speaks to the same government, even if it's this MEC or the previous MEC or the previous administration.
All right. So what is clear, though, Ms. Jemsana Mantashe, is that people are resorting to killing their families because of poverty in the province. How does your department go about identifying families that live below the breadline so that we don't see similar cases?
Well, what we have done as a department to move forward is to make sure that we introduce more developmental programs because the support grants are an immediate relief to families in distress, but also we want to introduce skills development programs where we can enroll young people. We've introduced that where we are enrolling young people, but we're also putting money aside for cooperatives, for young people and mothers, and also identifying the hotspot areas in the province where poverty is rife so that we can take those mothers, those women, and put into our programs and take those children, working with the Department of Health, looking into children with malnutrition, putting them on a 10 months program where we monitor their growth, give them nutritional packs, but also put their mothers into programs that will see them being able to get income for themselves.
When you say you give families nutritional packs, what does that mean in practice?
It means that those who have children with malnutrition will take the children, give them food packs, breakfast packs that would last for a period of 10 months, working with the Department of Health, then we monitor their growth in that 10 months period. And if we're at a point where we feel they've grown enough, then we are able then to leave, to write a report on what then moving forward, so that when we leave and take the children out of that program, the 10 months program, we are able not to go back to that family again. They're able to have money, they're able to have income. But we've also picked up, Kholi, that in some areas, especially in the hotspot areas, that where families are really struggling, is that they would not have the child support grant. The parents would not have identity documents or birth certificates, therefore depriving the child of their right to get a child support grant. And so we've been moving in the past months with Home Affairs, with SASSA, and with also MDA to say parents must register for identity documents and register their children for birth certificates. But also saying to communities, whilst you wait to sort out your documentation with Home Affairs, children are eligible to get the child support grant for a period of 3 months without them having a birth certificate, because we've picked up that is a major factor that is also contributing to this.
There's one element, Ms. Jemsana Mantashe, that surely the department would have long awakened to, and that is that the poorest of the poor, where they tend to when money dries up, when their social grant basically finishes, they go to your mashonisas, these are people who lend money to the poor, but in order to guarantee that they get their monies back, they then hold on to the social grant card. Are you aware of that practice as a department, and what is it that you do to make sure that the loan sharks are not the ones that you are giving monies to under the assumption that you are giving this money to deserving people?
And I think, Crowley, this particular case might be linked to that. That is the suspicion that we have as a department. We have been awakened to that fact, and we are working with the intelligence agencies, but also the South African police services in making sure that we nip this in the bud. But unfortunately, we can't, as a department, go to Umashonisa, because you go there, you take the cards, you stop the cards, but then the beneficiary would go back. So what we are doing, working with the law enforcement agencies, is to really look at this and work with the banks to see the trends and making sure that we have programs, and we actually go to these areas where beneficiaries are really struggling because they are lending money to Omashonisa, because this is an illegal practice that requires the law enforcement agencies to help us. So there is an ongoing program that is taking place that the National Department and SASSA are engaged in making sure that in all the rural areas, in all the provinces, we try and cap this, as it is becoming a challenge that is really getting out of hand.
Final question to you. The Social Development Department means that there is the social aspect of it, and I take it that's the grants, but the developmental aspect of the department, is that being explored? Because surely the families that are unable to put food on the table can be helped in order to grow food gardens. It's called subsistence farming. Is your department looking into things like that, the developmental side of your department?
In actual fact, Tony, that's where we are at this point. We are putting money aside for cooperatives so that women, so that people in their communities can engage in these projects. Just 2 days ago, we went into Butterworth, where we were visiting a cooperative, their sewing cooperative, that we are funding as a department. And so we are encouraging young people, we're encouraging mothers, we're encouraging people to stand up and get involved in those programs. But we're also engaging the private sector in making sure that we introduce skills developmental programs, digital skills, your technical skills. But we're also helping young people to acquire driving licenses, taking them to driving schools so that they are ready for the job market or are able to open their own businesses. Just 2 months ago, we went to Tsomo to give certificates to young people that were trained in motor mechanics so that they can be able to open their own business, work in local businesses, mechanical businesses in the area. So that is the biggest push that we are pushing, that we are more developmental instead of being a welfare state. Yes, we'll continue with the social relief of distress and the grants as an immediate intervention to families that are living beyond that line of poverty. But we would want to look at the long-term plan of engaging the private sector, of also as government working with the Office of the Premier, putting money aside for skills developmental programs that will enable people to be able to open their own businesses and make their own income and employ other young people.
Busisiwe Jemsana Mantashe, let me thank you very much for your time. She speaks for the Department of Social Development in the Eastern Cape.